I ended up face down on the ground with an orange in my mouth, her pulling my hand behind my back as she kind of took a pencil and pretended to use it as a knife.
Hi, welcome to Zarnia for Games and Geekery, and today's guest is Sam Wilson, writer, author. I guess it's the same thing, but you write for so many different media. You're also a television writer. You've got some short films under your belt.
Kind of. I'm also I'm mainly a television director. That's my one of my day jobs.
One of your day jobs. And of course, you also have a background in animation, where
That's right.
You worked on Pax Urbo. What was that?
Yeah, so Urbo, The Adventures of Pax Africa was South Africa's longest running animated TV series. We did 104 episodes and we did them really, really fast. And it was a writing team of myself, Lauren Bierkus, Sarah Lotz, and Greg Cameron. And all of them have gone on to do extraordinary things. I believe you interviewed Lauren the other day.
Yeah, we got her.
So the concept was it's the distant future. Cape Town is the last city on Earth. Everything else has been obliterated by ecological devastation. And there's a kid called Pax Africa who discovers that there's a legend of a mysterious hidden city called Urbo, which has the technology to save the world. But it became basically just an ongoing science fiction soap opera about Pax Africa and his friends, and it was the most fun to write. It was tremendously enjoyable because, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of immediately rambling at the start of this.
That's fine. I'm here for the ramble.
It was tremendously fun to write because none of the censors were watching. None of the, normally if you're doing a show for grown-ups, then there's a lot of people from SABC who are saying, well, we don't want to kind of step on any political toes, so let's not mention, this was, back in 2007, 2008, let's not mention anything to do with the AIDS crisis or anything like that. Let's just, let's keep our heads down. But none of the censors were watching the kids shows, so we were able to, metaphorically tackle some really heavy duty stuff.
That's interesting. It's what a lot of people do use science fiction for, as a way to talk about other things and sneak in those kinds of themes. Why do you think we use science fiction in this way?
Well, it's just a great way of decontextualizing things. Like if you talk about race, immediately people are, they know the parameters with which it's safe to even think about certain things, because or not in terms of political correctness, but in terms of there's so much baggage that there's that people will immediately put up their defenses if you talk about privilege. So, for example, I've written this novel called Zodiac, which deals with a lot of those issues, but through the lens of astrology. So it imagines a world or a version of America which is divided by astrological sign rather than race or religion. So if you happen to be born on the wrong day, then you end up either ending up in the slums because people just won't give you a chance because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or if you happen to be born, for example, in this world, the Capricorns are the winners. Of life, and they end up getting all the advantages because they end up going to the best schools. They end up, if they happen to have a parking ticket, it's more likely to be dropped.
Uh-huh.
And it's just it's a murder mystery fundamentally, and that's just the universe in which it's set. But it was a lot of fun to be able to just explore those self-fulfilling prophecies in a way which recontextualizes them in a
where you can sneak in, not sneak in, because it's fairly obvious, like when you talk about division, that you're talking about bigotry and bias. We hear the argument in a fresh way when it's not presented as what we are already been programmed to ignore.
Sure, and also if you create a recontextualized universe. One of the things I really enjoy about a good science fiction novel is, mentally inhabiting that universe. So you've seen how it works, and then you as a reader, you just think, okay, well, what would it be like to live in that society? Once you understand the rules, then you kind of can mentally play in that space yourself, and that's, I think, a kind of a vital a vital human thing to be able to kind of imagine an alternative universe and inhabit it and think things through. Because once you can do that with a fake universe, you can start to do it with the real one.
Yeah, it's a very optimistic view of science fiction and storytelling.
I've just been reading like the collected essays of Terry Pratchett, which is just I've been holding off on, like I have the last like 5 Terry Pratchett books, which I'm not reading because I'm saving them for when I really need them, But this is the first of those ones which I'm starting to kind of get through. But he is so sharp on fantasy and science fiction, and he says that people often dismiss fantasy because because it's kind of it's childish and it makes things up. And he's saying that there's a great quote from G.K. Chesterton. So G.K. Chesterton said, "People who object to children's books because they teach children that there are monsters forget that the books also tell them that they can kill those monsters." And that's fundamentally it.
There are so many like wonderful people about wonderful quotes about the role science fiction and storytelling have in developing us as humans and our shared humanity. How is it different writing for children as it is to writing for adults?
It actually it isn't. I don't find it tremendously different. I mean, the television show which I'm mainly writing at the moment is a non-verbal show, so it's all about everything is being expressed through action, through just the kind of subtle thoughts going across people's faces or characters' faces. It's a show called Jungle Beat. It's been going since about 2003. But over the years, it's been getting better and better. If you've ever traveled on like a Kalula flight, you've probably seen an episode playing on the screen. But over the years, the quality has been getting significantly better. Like, so to the point that this last season, which I'm currently, I've written, or I was the head writer on, and I'm currently directing. It's seriously Pixar level animation. And I'm not messing around. We have some phenomenal world-class animators. It's beautiful, but it's also extremely expressive. So because I'm not having to worry about toning down the language or anything like that, it really is all about putting yourself into the characters' shoes and making sure that they really are expressing themselves, through their actions, through their faces, so that you are at all times are fully aware of, what the story is, because it's in these characters' minds.
Do you find yourself acting things out when you're in the process of writing?
Always, yes. It's a vital part of it. In fact, that's one of the wonderful things about working with animators, which I learned really quickly when working on Obo, was that because animators have to really perform. It is a performance which they're doing. It's a very slow performance, but they're getting these little kind of. It's almost puppetry. They're getting these little characters and they're making them move in particular ways. So they have to think very carefully about how the characters' bodies move, how their faces move, how a particular emotion expresses itself physically. So they do end up kind of becoming living cartoon characters, which is just the most wonderful thing. So on Obo, everyone just got a kind of code name. Like I was the wombat, there's the rat. I think Lauren was the squirrel, and you could those names were kind of chosen by the group because they were kind of expressing something about how they were personally expressing themselves.
It's interesting. It's almost a kind of internal research where you're reflecting on yourself and your own like movements in order to tell the stories. Do you find that also happens psychologically?
I mean, it's hard to tell.
Sorry, because this is a book about murder, so maybe that was like too much of a tense. When you said you act out everything.
No, I mean, I was in the room when Lauren was working on a murder or an attempted murder scene in Shining Girls. So she had to. In order to be able to describe it, she had to kind of act it out. So I ended up face down on the ground with an orange in my mouth and her pulling my hand behind my back as she kind of took a pencil and pretended to use it as a knife, just so she could properly express how you murder someone. That'll stick in my head for a while.
Is that one of the highlights or the lowlights of your career so far?
There's so many highlights, but that's definitely one of them.
Okay, can you tell us another one?
Let me think. The moment my 3-year-old daughter got addicted to something I'd written, like, the first time she said, "I want to see that again," was the best, one of the best feelings. Yeah, I know I had not screwed up at that point.
Kids are a tough audience. They're a very honest audience. They
Yes.
will.
Yeah, there's no tax, or there are no tactics. There's no dissembling there. It's pretty straightforward.
So when you've won them over, you know you've done a real job.
Yes. Although, I mean, she also kind of watches, she's also addicted to YouTube videos about people building Lego in double speed. So I don't, it doesn't prove anything objectively, but it still made me feel good.
So tell me about the process of, we touched on Lauren researching how to kill people. How do you go about creating a mystery in a book for a story?
I do the careful plotting thing where I kind of structure, okay, this happens, then this happens. Then I write out a kind of 2 or 3 page document which says, okay, this is what's going to happen in the novel. And then I start writing, and often things go wildly off that course because, characters, you suddenly realize when you put yourself into that moment for that particular character, there's no way they'd do that. They're not that stupid. They have their own plans. So then you have to kind of work out how to make it so that it isn't a coincidence that the things you want to happen.
It's funny how characters take on their own lives and start pushing back.
Well, I mean,
is that when you kill them off?
No, I only kill people off when my editor says, "Look, we need you can't be nice to everyone. Someone needs to die at some point." So I'm okay. But it's true. Like, I really do think that we have a kind of a part of our brains which simulates other people. And I think that's a vital part of what empathy is, that, we are able to, it's like a subsystem. It automatically works out, okay, this person is thinking this based on, like, if I were to put myself in their shoes, that's what I'd be doing. So it's, it's just an automatic system. And that's the system you're hijacking when you're writing. You're just taking that thing and saying, okay, this person is thinking this in this context. It doesn't matter that they're not a real person. They're real enough for me to work out what they're thinking.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even a rational, logical, this is what this person would be thinking because of this. No. It's a kind of a felt thing.
Exactly. Because it's a subsystem in your brain. It's just a gut instinct. It's like, oh, well, that's, there's no way no way they're going to murder someone at this point, and I'm going to have to change the person or rework the plot.
Wow, that seems like quite a... What's the hardest part of writing? Because it seems like that decision is very hard.
Look, the hardest part of writing is, for me, it's ego. It's like I have a standard of like where I want to be as a writer, and I have the actual words which come out of my fingers when I type, and so I'm often writing. I have to get over the hurdle of rewriting the first sentence like a dozen times, and like it becomes as perfectly formed and polished as a gem or a tweet. It's just this tiny little bit of perfection, and then I still have 100,000 more words to write. So at some point I have to kind of start. So at some point I have to start rushing ahead, and so it becomes a balancing act of trying to maintain an impossibly high standard at the same time as actually getting something done. And luckily, in the case of Zodiac, I got it done. But I will never reread this book because my own standards. Like I heard the audiobook and I heard myself repeating the same word in 2 consecutive sentences, and I was like, okay, I'm out. That's it wasn't nearly polished enough.
The spoken word, you work in both the spoken word and now in like the written word, and by that I mean words that are meant to be received through someone else's voice. Is there any kind of different approach in that? Is the rhythm of sentences or anything different?
Well, it's one of the things which I found most useful, which I learned from writing for television, is that the words on the page, they can look great on the page, but as soon as you start to read them, you suddenly realize how much tighter they could be, how much waffling goes into the written word, which you lose you want to lose when you're speaking. So one of the things I did for this was to attempt to at least quietly read it through, at least whisper it through, go through every single word and actually feel the rhythm of the writing. And I think that did help. Like a compliment which I've got on this book is, and it's a bit of a double-edged compliment, is that it was really easy to read. And in some ways that's, I know what that kind of means. I mean, this is not highfalutin literature. This ain't your fancy books, but
but that is the charm of something. Some books feel like you're sitting at a bar and a stranger's telling you a story, like the ice clinks in his whiskey glass, and other stories feel like you're reading poetry.
Yes.
It's about finding the right words for your story. Where can people find your book?
Zodiac's available on Amazon and Audible.
Brillo. Okay, and your personal social medias, where people can find you?
I'm hiding from social media at the moment. I used to be quite active on Twitter. Way back at the beginning of Twitter, I had a Twitter-based service where people would tweet me things and I would scream their tweets off the top of Table Mountain. That was back when Twitter was a new and exciting thing, and people hadn't discovered. It was like I was experimenting with making a complete jackass of myself on Twitter. I was ahead of the curve in that regards, but I also realized that it was a terrible mistake before everyone else, and I'm out of there now.
All right, very good, very good. Great. So you can't find Sam Wilson anywhere. You can only find his books, and they are available Amazon and Audible. Sam Wilson, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. This has been Zarnia for Games in Geekery. This geek is Sam Wilson.